Holocaust. One American story. Gerda Weissmann was a carefree girl of 15 when in September 1939, invading German troops shattered her world. Because the Weissmanns were Jews, they were forced to give up their home to a German family. In 1942, Gerda, her parents, and most of Poland's 3 million Jews were sent to labor camps. Gerda recalls when members of Hitler's elite Schutzstaffel, or security squadron SS, came to round up the Jews. We had to form a line, and an SS man stood there with a little stick. I was holding hands with my mother, and he looked at me and said, "How old?" And I said, 18, and he sort of pushed me to one side, and my mother to the other side. And shortly thereafter, some trucks arrived, and we were loaded onto the trucks. I heard my mother's voice from very far off ask, "Where to?" And I shouted back, "I don't know." Gerda Weissmann-Klein. Gerda Weissmann-Klein, quoted in the film One Survivor Remembers. American Lieutenant Kurt Klein liberated her from the Nazis in 1945. It was just one day before her 21st birthday. She weighed 68 pounds, and her hair had turned white. Of all her family and friends, she alone had survived the Nazis' campaign to exterminate Europe's Jews. Klein would later become Gerda's husband. The persecution begins. Vocabulary: scapegoat, someone who is made to bear the blame of others. On April 7, 1933, shortly after Hitler took power in Germany, he ordered all non-Aryans to be removed from government jobs. This order was one of the first moves in a campaign for racial purity. That campaign eventually led to the Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews across Europe. The Nazis also murdered 5 million other people. Jews targeted. Although Jews were not the only victims of the Holocaust, they were the main Nazi targets. Anti-Semitism, or hatred of the Jews, had a long history in parts of Europe. For decades, many Germans had been looking for a scapegoat. They blamed the Jews as the cause of their failures. Adolf Hitler rose to power in part by promising to return Germany to its former glory. Hitler found that a majority of Germans were willing to support his belief that Jews were responsible for Germany's economic problems and defeat in World War I. He also told the Germans that they came from a superior race, the Aryans, an idea that was found in German music and folktales. Hitler effectively used this notion to build support for his plans. As the Nazis tightened their hold on Germany, their persecution of the Jews increased. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws stripped Jews of their German citizenship, jobs, and property. Jews had to wear a bright yellow Star of David attached to their clothing to make it easier for the Nazis to identify them. Worse things were yet to come. Kristallnacht, November 9 to 10, 1938, became known as Kristallnacht, Kristallnacht, or Night of Broken Glass. Nazi stormtroopers attacked Jewish homes, businesses, and synagogues across Germany, Austria, and the recently occupied Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. The Nazis claimed the attacks were a spontaneous reaction to the assassination of a Nazi official by a Jewish teenager. In fact, Nazi officials encouraged the violence. On November 17, 1938, 2 passers-by examined the shattered window of a Jewish-owned store in the aftermath of Kristallnacht. During the rampage, thousands of Jewish businesses and places of worship were damaged or destroyed. An American who witnessed the violence wrote, "Jewish shop windows by the hundreds were systematically and wantonly smashed. The main streets of the city were a positive litter of shattered plate glass. Around 100 Jews were killed, and hundreds more were injured. Some 30,000 Jews were arrested." Afterward, the Nazis blamed the Jews for the destruction and held them financially responsible. Jews were fined a total of 1 billion marks. A flood of Jewish refugees Kristallnacht marked an increase in the Nazis' Jewish persecution and sent a clear message to those Jews still in Germany. Over 100,000 managed to leave in the months following the attacks. However, many had trouble finding countries that would accept them. Nazi laws had left many German Jews without money or property, and most countries were unwilling to take in poor immigrants. France already had 40,000 Jewish refugees and did not want more. The British worried about fueling anti-Semitism. They refused to admit more than 80,000 Jewish refugees. The British also controlled the Palestine Mandate, part of which later became Israel. They did allow 30,000 refugees to settle there. Late in 1938, Germany's foreign minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop, observed, "We all want to get rid of our Jews. The difficulty is that no country wishes to receive them."